First of all, I want to thank everyone who watched or listened in last week. We are now on YouTube as well, our KGUA channel. And we had an amazing ocean life symposium last week. We especially want to thank Lee and Lindsay for all the work she did pulling it off, along with Scott and Tree Mercer, who got all of the experts together for that. And everyone who took part in it. Paul Monday, Roberta Chan, George Callis, myself, and our dear friend Jean Berry, who cooked food for us in the morning, brought us breakfast every morning. We got spoiled. But anyway, it was a great event, and it's still on our YouTube channel. We'll eventually get the audio up, but you can actually see 19 ocean scientists talking about everything from great white sharks to seaweed to climate change, warming, all kinds of things. And it's there. It's there for you on KGUA's YouTube channel. So this morning, as you know, speaking of ocean and water, it's raining outside again. Yeah. And that's great. What? And Mr. Rain Man, who runs in the rain, how'd you do running in the rain?
Well, I ran in the rain, and it was glorious. And I sent Billy a note saying, it's light rain, it's beautiful, no one's out here, because he takes Woof out and I take Ruff out. And then on the way back, I changed it. Heavy rain.
Now, Woof and Ruff, twin dogs. Well, not exactly twins, but they very much look like twins.
Well, they're the same breed and they're related, but their personalities, of course, are a little bit different. But they're both, I don't know where they get it from. They're both divas, want to be center of attention, interrupting each other with barks all the time. Do you think that's a learned environmental thing, or do you think that's part of the breed?
I think some dogs are just made like that, but particularly herding dogs, because herding dogs, they're automatically the leaders. I bet they herd you around the house too.
Oh my goodness. And yet they herd and they look at you. Well, Cooper's a herding dog.
He's part
herding,
maybe part herding,
because he has that alertness. They follow around and like, where are you going? You're going to the other one?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of that.
I'm going to bark louder. It's like, okay, guys, but they're awesome. And they're awesome.
Jada's pure lab, but Jada is like, there can be no other dog before you go and pet Cooper, pet Sophie, right. And she's right there, throws your hand and looks at what we call gorilla eyes.
Right. Woof will snub his nose on a treat. I'll give one to Ruff. And then all of a sudden, Woof is sitting like attention. Yeah. But the funniest thing is, we'll talk more about later. The funniest thing, as we drove cross country, he would sit in the hatchback like a gargoyle, staring at me through the rearview mirror. He could see my face the entire trip. I don't think he ever slept on the drive. You look in the rearview mirror and his ears are going. He's looking right at me. He figured out if he looks at the rearview mirror, he could see my face.
Oh, that's funny. As you can tell, Mark and I are totally trained by our dogs. Totally. We love our dogs. I had a dog once. I was working in DC, living alone. I came back in a little Nissan. I think it was an old Nissan hatchback. And I had my dog then. And I learned how to feed her one-handed. You learn how to just get the pan out, put the food, shake the food out. And so she could eat.
Well, and I don't advocate this. I'm sure nobody with a dog up here does this, but sometimes they'll want to sit really close to when you're driving and drop the ball under the gas pedal.
Oh gosh.
And it's like,
oh no.
Well, now they both go in the back, but
I have seen people sitting with usually little fluffy white dogs inside their arm as they're driving, and the little dog is looking out. But anyway, okay, that's about dogs.
Dogs.
Mark, tell people what they're listening to.
KGUAWriters back again after a little bit of a hiatus because of the wonderful Ocean Symposium and me traveling through time zone that day, not really knowing what time I would be where to get on the air.
That's right. Well, you managed it well. And so Mark did another cross-country trip and is back again. And he showed me some pictures I had not seen. And I talked to a friend in Alexandria yesterday. She didn't even tell me that it was flooded.
It's our running route. We rent it every morning. Our apartment is there. And we would just run 3-4 miles around the waterfront, back up King Street, get some coffee. And King Street, it's like Rock Ridge. It's one of these historic old districts, as you know, was halfway flooded. I mean, it was flooded up to City Hall where people in rowboats. And I spoke to a neighbor of mine today. She said, it's all back to normal, but it's fine. And, but it wasn't flood from the rains. This is what was interesting. It was a tidal flood from the Potomac. And the Potomac there from the district to Alexandria, it was just, overflowing.
Wow.
And now with all the growth in that area because of Amazon and Virginia Tech, they're all going there. The waterfront has become, you wouldn't recognize it. It's kind of like multi-million-dollar condo after condo after condo. And they extended decks onto the Potomac for waterside dining. You just would not.
I wouldn't know it anymore.
You would not know this. You would not recognize this, but it's all flooded, so welcome to seizing an opportunity, but Mother Nature is going to kind of flood that deck. And
well, it sort of shows you the wisdom of the Beltway, doesn't it?
It just never changes. Something about, I was running my second day there, and I'm running on the Virginia side of the Potomac, and I passed this massive structure of silver and iron and gates along the GW Parkway on the banks. It's like, what the heck is that? And it's the new metro stop to serve Amazon.
Oh my God. And so that's why Crystal City disappeared.
It's National Landing now.
Oh.
But you have to, I mean, I stopped. Old Town used to be what you call the blue-haired lady place, right? This was Revolutionary War and all the old time Americana, and a lot of those retailers are going out of business. So there's the Toastique boutique, which is Toast Boutique. There
Toast.
are 3 toast, regular white bread toast. It's a boutique. Wait, this is awesome. I told Barbara about this at Anchor Bay. There's 3 or 4 tattoo shops in Old Town Alexandria now. There's everything you can imagine. But I stopped in a dry goods store that's modeled after an old 1800s store. And you walk in whisk brooms, and everything's made by hand. And
wooden floors.
Wooden floors. A dustpan is $100, right? Only 6 Morning Glory muffins. No plastic. Everything maple syrup. And there were 2 pumps, soda fountain pumps. And I said, "What's in the soda fountain pump?" She says, "Oh, draft kombucha." "Have you not had draft kombucha?" I said, "I haven't even had kombucha." It says, "Oh, you must." Well, of course I must. So I had the draft kombucha. Now I'm drinking kombucha. Draft kombucha. So I said to Barbara, Willala needs this. But it's so typical of DC, right?
Right.
Just draft kombucha.
Draft kombucha. Well, all right. Well, I know we probably should get to West Coast now, but Mark and I can't help it because, he lived there most of his life. I've lived there a couple of times. And as we always say, there is, I don't know if we always say, but I do think it's worth visiting.
It's a magnificent place.
Capital of this nation if you want to see what it looks like from the outside. And if you even want to go sit in, if you can get a ticket to the Supreme Court like today, which is a major day, but any day, it's pretty awesome when you see. I was listening to the hearings this morning, and if you've never, here I go, I'm sorry, back to a Washington story, but if you've never been to the Supreme Court, I mean, being able to get a ticket and sit there, it is just, it's almost reverential because the justices are sitting very high up, and they're all dressed in black, and they sit there, they're kind of like ravens, and they sit there and they rock back and forth and they listen, and you have, opposing sides. What do they get? 15 minutes each or 20 minutes each? Something like that. Each side has to, that's all they've got. And then they have to leave. That's what it takes to get to the Supreme Court. And you've got an audience there, and it is just, you could hear a pin drop.
Well, it's interesting you say that because everything, if it starts with an A or ends with an A, there's a building like the American Association of, or the everything has an association. I was walking on one of my nights, and I passed the American Association of Hot Tubs and Pools.
Okay, with that,
Okay.
this is the American Association of KGUA Writers live from KGUA in
That's right.
Walla. So let's get started, Mark. Today's prompt was
Things you hold on to.
things you hold on
Things you
to.
hold on to. And thank you for the very, very quick responses from so many people. And there we go.
There we go. So why don't we hear a voice? Hey, I'm out of practice over here. I've got everything in the way. Why don't we hear a voice, our episode, first voice from someone Mark knows very, very well. And here we go.
Prompt 75 asks what you are holding on to. So there is a room in New Jersey that has a window facing west, and that window is facing a sunset outside. So the light of the sun is now turning golden and falling into the room, and the dust particles hanging in the room are illuminated like little stars, golden stars. And in that room, that sunlight falls upon a wall unit of shelves. And he looks at this wall and realizes that some of those shelves have a thin layer of dust and thinks that maybe tomorrow I'll do some dusting. For now, he takes his index finger and puts a line in the dust and comes upon a record of Mahler. And with that index finger and thumb, he takes that record out. And it's in the condition it was probably 35 to 40 years ago. In fact, the cellophane that originally sealed it is still on, except for one side. And he pulls the record out, making sure he doesn't touch it, and holds it with his palm facing up, balancing the record with index finger on the spindle hole on the bottom and the thumb on the edge, and brings the record over to the turntable that's bathed in dust and sunlight, and all is warm. And the platter is turning, and he sets the record onto the turning platter, and he holds on to the tone arm, which contains a needle, and he gently and manually lets the needle fall upon the turning record like a turning gyro. And in that last movement, the sounds begin, and the room is now transformed into a hall in Vienna. And he holds on to the sound. And he realizes, too, that that sound is, though majestic, it's more than sound. The way it's created on the record makes him think of a river valley, a river between two mountains. These grooves that are now being tracked by a needle not from a pandemic, but a needle to take sounds recorded years ago and turn them into a room of beautiful sound. But really, he realizes again that it's not just sound that he's holding on to.
Barry Hollerit.
Barry, that was fabulous. And that, those of us of your generation, could just absolutely identify with, putting your
The
fingers
groove
under
and it's
the groove
skipping, right?
and the skipping, and you gently placing the needle down
Yeah.
on the turntable. Just all of those things. I've even thought about getting a turntable maybe once or twice a
I
year.
know I have too. There are so many things. Laura Nero just came out with a $200 collection of her work and liner notes, and it's supposed to be incredible, but it's vinyl, not an album, not a record. It's vinyl.
Vinyl.
It's
all
vinyl.
right.
But,
Very nice.
But that was the word that came from. I was listening to the biography of Thomas Mann driving out. We were talking about it, and I had no idea about the relationship between Thomas Mann and Mahler, Gustav Mahler. And there was a film on Death in Venice, and Mahler does the soundtrack from the 1970s, and it's absolutely brilliant.
I saw that in the 70s.
Oh, you did?
I did when I was young and intellectual.
But it's so funny. I was talking to Barry about this. I watched the film, and Dirk Bogarde.
Oh gosh, yes.
At the end, all his makeup from polishing his hair and his mustache because he wanted to look younger. He's dying on the beach, and it starts to drip. And Barry calls me, says, "Rudy Giuliani." It was hilarious. It was hilarious.
Oh my goodness. See the things you learn here on this KGUA Writers. Why don't you, read something? Are you going to actually, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll do.
Start?
Yeah, I'm going to start because you're going to ask me about the trip. So I wrote a long piece that we'll just do snippets of throughout the thing. What I hold on to. I hold on to the belief that the action to be kind is essential. It may sound like a cliche, in some cases it might be, but we live in a community that, yes, regardless of frustrations and some issues, we have a foundation of kindness, a place where it might be easy to be judgmental, but in a way we keep it to ourselves. But what is being kind? More than just a smile or as simple as just a smile. Kindness happens when we fight the urge to pass by people that may make us uncomfortable. There is a space between judgmental fear and mindfulness awareness. It is this space we find kindness. Just returning from my second cross-country drive, I thought about this and implemented it further. Deciding on a road trip that included running in different places across the country to break the highway hypnosis and avoid repeating to my dog, "Are we there yet?" Stopping on trails not near the big city sites, but in the local Wallala type places, going east to DC and then back west would be my motivation. Rails to Trails is a nonprofit conservancy that for decades has worked on transforming old train routes, not in existence anymore, into pedestrian hiking, biking, and running trails. For instance, the C&O train, Chesapeake and Ohio, now a pedestrian trail, runs from Georgetown, DC to Cumberland, Maryland, and is extending to Pittsburgh along the Potomac River. Railway trains already laid the grounds for flat and direct routes. There are dozens of these across the country. Recently, Rails to Trails started to develop the Great America Trail by connecting existing rails trails with local trails, not part of rails, to the Great America Trail as connectors. The goal is to have a cross-country trail for bikers, runners, and hikers, and just restoring the land. No, I'm not Forrest Gump, but I did have the app on my phone called Trail Link. Put in your zip code, immediately all the trails around that area pop up with the info about each trail, including dog-friendly or not. So some unexpected highlights that became memories of this trip, reminders of kindness, reminders of home. Here's the first. Wells, Nevada. People stop here to stay the night on a long drive east or west at the end or beginning of Nevada. Main Street, mostly a grouping of gas stations and truck stops, a few motels. Travelers usually pass Wells for Winnemucca. Thanks, Kevin Bentley. That's how I learned about it. A run through this almost out of business town away from the gas stations and convenience stores along Route 80. I passed storefronts of businesses closed after decades with dated signs and posters and dusty windows with rusted locks on doors. A museum with a Pony Express Help Wanted sign. A bar, an outdoor yard of old machines. The diner with my grandmother's name, Bella, that invited me and Ruff in for coffee. A few locals and separate tables made the place seem easy. "Wait a bit, please," the server said. "I am the only one here. Relax, everyone just passes through here nowadays for gas or overnight before hitting the road again." She brought Ruff water. "Can you tell me where to run for a few miles?" I asked. "Sure, honey, go out that way. Turn left on the road away from the interstate. Stay left and turn again at the old bank. Go as far as you want and turn onto another street for a different way back. Don't worry about the road. We have very few cars going along these days." I ran through the neighborhoods around the local soccer field and up and down Main Street through passing family ranch homes with dogs in yards and open garages, a stroller here and there, artificial wreaths on screen doors, or signs of welcome. On the way back, I stopped at Bella's, thanked the server, and bought a Bella's coffee mug for the trip. Packed up, gassed up, on my way.
Oh, very nice. Memories of Nevada.
Yeah.
Really nice. I know that road, but I don't know the streets, but
Right,
thank you.
Right? Truck stop 76, Dunkin', all this stuff, and I'll get gas. I'll wait till the next stop. And then all of a sudden you pull off, in my case, the Super 8. And then all of a sudden I ran in the morning and I engaged, and it was like, wow. And then it was another thought of being grateful for where we live and the people we deal with.
Mhm.
So more to
All
come.
right, more to come from Mr. Mark. Let's hear another voice, and then I'm gonna read something. You are listening to KGUA Writers on the 1st of November. Let's hear Mr. Rothermel.
You must be thinking, surely there are other decades in your prime that are contenders. Well, let's examine the facts. The first 10 years as a kid in suburbia were fine, but the details escape me. Let's chalk those years up as challengers to the past decade. Teenage years, dead last. Though good high school friends, my insecurities ran amok. 20s, gotta say, this might have been the silver medal. Going to Arizona State changed my life for the better, and I wooed and married the girl of my dreams. One Hannah cry. 30s, by far, our 3 kids are what Hannah and I are most proud of. But parenting youngins is just exhausting. We survived. 40s, teaching middle schoolers. Enough said, didn't make the top 10. 50s, I'm thinking I have the bronze here. I got my dream job teaching at the university. The above roll call has not changed my mind that these past 10 years remain numero uno. Time, health, resources, and choices. Oh, and one more thing. I'm still doing it all with the girl of my dreams.
You know, I every week the love that shines through whatever he writes.
There's something about Dan and Dave. Dan about his, Hannah, banana, all of it for a year and a half now, and Dave about beloved.
Yeah,
It must be
exactly.
that northeastern. Maybe Tree and Scott talk that way too. I have to ask Tree if Scott's his beloved.
That's a good question. What the answer to-
Tree. Well, he got it.
He got it. Well, I'm going to read from. Is the names or not?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. You know, we want to be sure. Some of you like to remain
Right.
anonymous, and we want to honor that. This is from Kevin Bentley. I have to say, optimism, as trite as that might sound, there are days when I wonder, why do I hold on to hope and optimism? I can't answer. It seems to be a default setting. This is somebody in the tech industry, isn't it? A default setting.
Maybe he uses.
Oh, we're having a dog alert. Dog alert. Dog walking down the road. Sorry, Kevin, you understand this completely. So we can't control what happens to us in the world, but we can always control what we do about those things. I hold on to optimism that I can work on managing other things I hold on to, like regrets, fear, jealousy, anger, and worry over how decisions I might make turn out. I hope that the cosmic fickle finger of fate doesn't point me at a sling or an arrow, but I hold on to optimism that if it does, I am up to the task of responding and moving forward to whatever my definition of happiness is. I've been lucky indeed thus far in my life. Really, I have. But if in the future I am tested in ways incomprehensible, I also hold on to hope that I remain resilient and optimistic enough to cross over to whatever the other side is. To that end, while I remain optimistic that things won't go wrong during our upcoming pack up and move, I'll be backing that feeling up with plenty of real world checking of tire pressures, double checking of doggy collars and leashes at rest breaks, and checking of auto fluid levels, plus whatever else I can think of to ward off avoidable drama. Excelsior!
When I was thinking about this prompt, I was going to say I hold on to optimism. Then I saw Kevin's, and it's nice to know. And Kevin, there's a dog park outside the outlet mall in some place on Route 80, which I'll have to tell you about. An actual dog park in the outlet mall.
In the outlet mall, my goodness. Hey, and you're going to have to remind us of what that app was, the dog Trail Link.
Trail Link, and it's free. I mean, you could upgrade, but just put in your zip code, and if it's not an authentic rails to trails, because the trains didn't go over the mountains, right? It will connect you. Right, it'll connect you through them. But Trail Link was amazing, as is all trails. So it was terrific.
Great. I'm going to read another one. And this is from the wonderful Mary Mobert. I'm used to hearing her voice.
Well, we talked yesterday. She says, I haven't finished. I can't get up there to record. I said, just write it. She's awesome. And she's doing great.
That's great. That's great. The Prized is what she titled this. My children mean a great deal to me, but they've lived lives unto themselves and apart from me since they were born. I've been caretaker and guide to them, little else. I've seen friends come and go, taking painfully tearful goodbyes, then tapering into the forgotten. After my fall this July, I've been seriously going through my household that hasn't been deep cleaned since we moved in 45 years ago. Garments I hadn't worn in 20 years now reside at goodbye clothes. Books, read and unread, are off my shelves and onto someone else's. If a fire took it all, would any of what's gone be missed by me now or those in the future? So, what do I prize above all? When I died because of an auto accident, I was allowed to rest through the night with the entity of light who welcomed me into their realm. Daily, I see that entity in the world around me, sparkling in sunlight, gliding through rustling leaves, glinting off dew, dancing among ocean waves, a quiet fog resting between the storm and the bright of day. Step 3 of Alcoholics and Narcotics Anonymous is we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. I made that leap into the void years before I became familiar with those organizations, long before the night I rested with that entity. Wherever I go, what happens in this life or any of the lives, I will not live until enlightenment. I know that being lives within me and I within them. They own my existence and the time allotted to it. None of it is mine. It is that which I can never deny or let go. Whoa, Mary.
Oh, Mary.
292 words, and you have said volumes in that.
With an optimistic undertone.
I love this. I love this. And I will say I will join you in this strange area. I have actually almost died, or maybe died 6 times in my life. You know, waking up and having somebody, a doctor with their hand on your arm and say, you know, we just about lost you. But here I am, supposed to be here. That's all I can say.
And you have this strong spiritual belief from your native background of when it's time, it's time. And, you know, you're a realist. And yet I've watched you go through even minor struggles compared to what you've been through, like the knee, which was major, but not compared to what you've been through. And just hobble around and do it. And it's another day. And
that's it. That's life. Just hobble around and do it.
Look at Mary, right? Let me remind the audience, Mary broke her neck just 2 months ago.
I actually haven't seen Mary. I have, you know, so many people have seen her, hugged her for me. Yeah, just an amazing woman, Mary. Thank you for all your inspiration.
Thank you, Mary.
All right, let's hear from, here's someone we haven't heard from in quite a while. You want to introduce this person?
I believe you're talking about Tempera Board.
Tempera Board, here we go.
Thanks, Tempera.
Several meals in ever decreasing quantity and conversely increasing value. It's cellar root salads from here on out. Several meals in ever decreasing quantity and conversely increasing value. It's cellar root salads from here on out. My grandmother's Hard Rock maple dining set from the 1930s, and the memory of her sitting at it with my mom and me, tapping her plastic Scrabble tile, humming and looking for a spot to play. Half-crazed love letters I haven't looked at in 25 years from a person I haven't seen in as long a time and never will again. My husband's strong shoulders as he sleeps every night, thankful for this. The idea that the best part of my day, my mind, my life should be spent in the pursuit of billable hours. And the hope that I'll give up that notion while there's still time.
Okay, tempera.
Well, things we hold on to is better editing on the audios, Mark.
We're going to have to reprise that tempera, but it was, there was a lot there we could all relate to
So
anyway.
maybe it was meant to be slow to savor this, like David's shoulders in the celery salad. We'll think about that. So stay tuned for an encore of Tempera's things to hold on to next week.
But clearly she was definitely thinking of those things, and thank you, Tempera. We'll be back with
and in
you.
a way, it resonates. I mean, just the celery salad and my
the other thing
husband's
that
strong
left,
shoulders.
I know you
and the table. Yeah. I mean, okay, we'll just take it in doses.
absolutely, and that's kind of how those thoughts about this prompt come to you. You start going
right.
through.
You
I don't know about you. I just started going through all kinds of things and rejecting them.
You know where that prompt came from? I was in the park and I saw people hiking with hiking poles, and one person had a walking stick and holding on to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what do we hold on to? And then of course it exploded, and that's where it came from. Somebody holding onto a walking stick, grasping it, and wondering what are you holding on to? Is that the dog outside?
I see nothing outside.
Shadows in the windows. Okay. Should we go?
You should.
I'll do
let's go to part
two.
Part
Okay.
two of Mark's journey across America. This is KGUA Writers in Wallala, 88.3 FM.
Green River, Wyoming. An amazing find along the Green River Trail on one side and Painted Rock on the other side, started by crossing an iron bridge on something called the Green River Greenway. A local couple at 8 a.m. walking hand in hand shouted out "morning" and suggested I slow down as we were at 6,000 feet elevation. The pavement was marked with chalk 10K markers from the local school race the weekend before. I met a kayak instructor in the parking lot from Colorado. He was worried that no one showed up for his lesson. Cody, I think his name. I said hi and started my run. On the way back, he was still there. I had the wrong date. It's tomorrow. People were setting up for a wedding at the gazebo. Maybe you can do a wedding lesson. Kayak. We laughed, and after that, we got into a conversation of the divinity found in grand landscapes, referencing rare books we both had read. At first, I thought he was some guy living out of a van from Colorado, his license plates. I was nervous leaving the car and more anxious when he was still at my car after my run. Our chat on the power of the mountains and the vast land still echoes. 3, North Platte, Nebraska. You know that one, Peggy.
I know all of these places.
Oh, do you? Wow. The Whitaker Trail runs along the North Platte River. Named after a legendary runner, the trail runs around quiet Lake Maloney, then alongside a reservoir wall looping back on a quiet country road with a passing red tractor alongside wide open farmland. Barns and windmills against a cloudless sky, chickens chirping. I felt a bit desolate along the reservoir wall, and after a mile, cut through some trees to that paved road. Another mile along the road took me to a top entrance to the lake and a boardwalk out onto the water, which Ruff really loved. It was one of the most peaceful runs I have had, the same quietness as early morning runs in Stornetta. Back to the hotel, packed up, gassed up, coffee in my Bella's mug.
I have that part of North Platte, I don't know, but having traveled those roads a
Right.
lot and been in Nebraska off and on, I do know a lot of those areas. And there is such a difference in the openness of Nebraska and
Wyoming.
in Wyoming. They're also different. Wyoming, vast.
And I think there's a reason why each one takes a day to go through.
Warning. Each state takes a day to go through. If you're
Have a good
driving.
trip, Kevin.
Hey, I need something to read.
Let me see what you've got there.
What have
And
I got? I did Mary and Kevin.
why don't you do this
Is that it? One half sheet?
and this? And I'm looking-
Okay.
Why
Well,
not?
let's, are these one? Good.
Yeah.
Lori Young. I'm sorry, I have to read this, Lori. Dear Peggy and Mark, for once, I can't think of anything to say, except I'm grateful you're both back for more KGUA writing prompts and reads. I hope to hear more about the oceanic studies and the road trip. What are you holding on to? I hold on to song tunes in my head. John Prine's song is one about the old woman whose chorus implores the listener to just give me that one thing I can hold on to. She's searching for something like meaning in her life. I don't identify with her, as my life has brimmed with meaning from the start. I did not need to hold on to those meanings as they drifted around through time. There's music, poetry, a boy with ivory skin, another boy riding his bicycle on his paper route and delivering to my house. He was the first Chinese person I'd ever seen. I wanted to get to know him and have him like me. We never spoke. We were in first grade, second grade. By third grade, you could say we both moved on. There was a burning need to be able to hang by my knees from a jungle gym bar, to hold on, like my best friend Missy. Her braids nearly touched the ground. I don't remember how our skirts arranged themselves as we hung, seemingly for hours, talking and talking until the 5 o'clock whistle blew and we had to come back to earth and go home around the fourth grade. By junior high, I was holding on to a love of learning and making new friends, but not like Missy. Now friends were less friendly. Who liked who became the issue of the day. Popularity was something to hold on to if you had it. I was not aware of having it, so I bonded with my schoolwork and made it through to high school. I held on to goals and made it through college. I've let that go. I hold fast to my life, to my love. That is everything.
Oh, I was not aware I had it. Lori, you do have something to write. Thank you.
Every week. Thank you.
I'm going to read Diane. So glad the writers group is back and hope you had a wonderful trip. I'm going to be 40 in a couple of months. As that monolith of middle age zeroes in on me. Wait a minute, Peggy and I are chuckling. 1 minute. I've been contemplating what I hope to achieve in this decade. When I turned 30, many of my desires were actions, travel, find a partner, get out of debt, find a better job. I made lists of things I needed to do to achieve them. And despite life throwing incredible challenges in my path, I both overcame those obstacles and checked off everything on the list. But now, this decade, I believe it is for me to turn inward. It's a daunting task. The more I dig into myself, the more I see the painful shortcomings that my busy life has masked. When I received an invitation to my 20th high school reunion, my reaction was visceral. I imagined making small talk with people who 20 years ago passed me in the halls without a word, or wouldn't let me sit with them at lunch, or forgot to invite me to their parties. It was my immediate outrage that surprised me, but didn't surprise me. I've been holding on to that hurt teenage self who was terrified of rejection. The girl who wasn't asked to dances or on dates. The girl who actually hung up on a boy who had called her to tell her he liked her because she was afraid that someone was playing a joke on her. While I know that she's been whittled away slowly with time, I see now that she is still deeply ingrained in me. How many times have I said no to something or been afraid to put myself out there because it was her voice, her fear, whispering in my ear. It's time to let go of the defensive posturing. I have to pull my hands away from my eyes and ask, why am I still holding on? Diane, thank you. And if it's any help, I think so many of us go back and there comes a time, and maybe the 40s started, when you do say, look inward and say, Why all that energy from all the rejection when I was younger? How do I turn it out? And look at what you're doing with your life now,
Mm-hmm.
and be proud that some of those people that rejected you are still searching.
It, high school, I don't know if for many of us was a wonderful thing. I couldn't wait to get out
Oh,
of
I
it.
couldn't wait.
And I
couldn't wait.
do remember, I think I was dragged to my maybe first or second high school reunion. And as we got out of the car, I saw all these middle-aged people and these guys with ponchos. And I said, who are those people? And my friend said, those are our classmates, Peggy. He's like, wow.
Well, you know what I love now? People see me on Facebook saying, hey, remember me? I was in gym class with you in 7th grade. Let's connect. No, you never noticed me in 7th grade and you made fun of me. I don't want to connect with you. I don't say that, but I just don't want to spend that time, like we started talking before the show, on it's not important anymore.
That's right. And thank you, Lori, for, acknowledging that there is
Lori
a
and
point when
Diane
we
and all of them.
we let it go. We let it go, and it did nothing for us then, and it definitely isn't anything to hold on to.
And Diane, one thing I must say, as Peggy was talking, one thing you will find up here is we all accept you because we've all been through rejections and challenges, and we're up here because of a reason. We're far away. It's hard to get here. And we all know that about each other, and we're here.
And we love that.
And we love that.
Thank you so much.
Do you want to play one?
Yeah, I do. We have Mr. Stola. Whoops. I have a little, there we go. I
Well,
had
we
one of
have-
those spinning balls we all hate. Okay, here we go.
Holding on, some reflections after the fall break for our KGUA writers and listeners, shared by David Stoloff, Easton, Connecticut. Besides the obvious, holding on to life, which is not a given during these precarious times, holding on to my beloved because I would be lost without Debbie, holding on to our kids for their futures will become our best stories, holding on to my job because I don't know what I would do without it, holding on to our community, our Willimantic, and all of its joys and challenges. I suppose the prompt suggests that I might be holding on to something, some memory that I don't want to let go. I hold on to things that I wish I could let go. Our museums of past technologies, our collection of our kids' artwork, our photos of family members that might not even be memories for our kids, my collection of t-shirts from past fundraisers, pants whose holes are now fashionable, and postcards from past travelers will be sifted through and dumped in a dumpster when I'm no longer here. When I try to let them go, I remember what each item meant to me, and I put it back into the pile. And remembering a memory that I wish I can let go only holds it in my mind longer. I missed writing for our group last week. I hope that we might hold on to our community for a while longer.
All right. Wow. Mark and I are holding on to.
We're holding on to this show, and we're going to keep moving along.
This is hot off the presses.
This is hot off the press. I love Jen Brera, lovely, sweet.
Actually, I guess that's something I hold on to is that phrase.
Hot off the press. I have to tell you something very funny about that if we have time.
Okay.
But Jen Brer, our Ayurvedic sweet life, wonderful person and friend and writer, is now in Los Angeles getting ready to go to Italy. And I said to her yesterday, I have extra, she said, I have extra tofu. Do you want? I said, are you holding on to extra tofu? So she says, my piece is coming late. What do I hold on to? I hold on to the sweet, gentle touches of our hands holding while walking together, the feel of your breath on my face as we sleep close together, the sound of your voice and how it changes in different situations, soft, loud, direct, and evasive, scratchy, strong, the presence I feel in you as you listen to something I speak vulnerably about. I hold on to these things more than anything else because they feel like the most real experience I feel with another person in a world full of mitigated relationships. And I am touched deeply by how our relationship touches and beautifully moves with my and our life. And we know who that's written to, her awesome husband, I hope. And this is after 8 hours of a drive to LA together. So you are a beautiful couple, and these are beautiful words, Jen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Very, very sweet. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just
No,
smiling.
we're both that way.
Yes, we are. We are both that way because we're who we are. Let's hear. This is our last spoken piece.
That's right.
So let's hear from Miss Littleton this week.
What Am I Holding On To by Jan Littleton. The first thought I had when I saw this prompt, what am I holding on to? I thought my sanity. These are crazy times. If you look at the news, if you look at the sitcoms, if you look, try to find comedies on Netflix, there's not a whole lot of laughable shows on. There are some, but I'm holding on to the belief that somehow it's going to get better. And I'm holding on to the belief that love is the answer. Silly old 60s stuff, but I believe it. And it's got me here, my love for the land, my family, my husband, my animals, all satisfy me. And they're things I hold on to with great love and care, I hope. I hold on to the belief system that I have developed through the years that somehow we will create heaven on earth, even if it's in our own homes, and that we also will create world peace in my lifetime. And people laugh at me, especially men, thinking that there's no way that that will ever happen. But I am holding on to the belief that there will be balance. And once there is balance, we'll see the insanity of war. And that even in third world countries and war-mongering countries like our own, that women will somehow rise up and bring balance to the understanding that love and compassion and understanding and sharing of wealth and, globalized free medicine. There's so many things that we could do, and it's going to be a hard transition. But I hold on to the belief that somehow that will happen. And I know I'm a Pollyanna, and I hold on to that. So I hope everybody has a great life. And as I end most of my stuff, I am sending love out to the universe, and I hope you're catching it.
All right. Sending love out to the universe. Thank you. I'm going to read Mariama Jones. I cling to this life with such effort. I know when I die, I'll be able to let go. Meanwhile, my fingers grip the earth for fear of floating away, because that's what I want. I don't want to be here. It happens to us extra people. We're happy as children. Then we hit 12 and start with the deep thoughts. Then 13 comes and the ennui flourishes. By 14, despair sets in and we go punk, goth, or emo to express our ire at being born into this S-string. Our terrible human legacy makes me want to puke on a good day. I haven't wanted to be here since I was 14. In my 30s, I started to wonder how many of us suffer because we live in ill, stress-filled, corrupt human systems. How many of us are depressed because we're ashamed to be human? I had a terrible childhood, but I made the most of it as a kid. I was the cutest kid you ever did see, until my baby sister's antics made her the cutest kid in the world. Then I met her daughter, who was so flippin' cute. I always grin when I think of her. My niece turned 12 last year. The questions pubescent Lily asks reminds me of my probing brain. Her contemplative gaze can make the most solid ego falter. She too has sized up our great lie and deemed humans painfully pathetic. I may have to teach her how to live a full yet shame-filled existence here on earth. For she may have to teach the future how to fix our ill esteem. Someone still has to teach us how to become the best we can humanly be.
And I applaud you for trying to be the best you can be, Mariama. It's a tough time to do that, but keep on keeping on. Remember optimism and all that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there are some good humans, and yes, we
Mhm.
humans have
We're tr-
definitely
we're
got
tr-
some
we're
faults.
Speaking of that, I'm going to read this. I'm not going to do them in geographical order anymore, but there are some highlights and I'll finish them the next week.
Okay.
On to Davenport, Iowa. Talk about a magical stop. The Mississippi Riverfront Trail runs alongside Davenport's waterfront downtown, sadly more vacant than occupied. Ruff and I were on the trail at 8:30 a.m. Not many people, a slow awakening of the city. We ran along the Mississippi and across the bridge over the river on the other side with statues of Lincoln and reminders of long ago, with cannons and monuments and plaques. Back through the park trail, one woman, someone that looked like they could be my neighbor here, was slowly picking up litter from the park. She was a park custodian and each morning for 37 years, picking up litter from the park. She was a park custodian for 37 years, and monitors the park to keep it clean. I stopped and we chatted. Her smile was grand, her laughter perfect, her name, Shirley. She thanked me for taking the time to talk. Not many people do, you know, talk to people, she said. I thanked her for what she does and how amazing Davenport is. I told her about our rangers here. We know them by name, Robert, Chris, Sue, Roberta. I asked her to take her photo. I'm not pretty, I said. Oh, yes, you are. You're beautiful. And she smiled wide open and held her arm up and thanked me again. She walked away with that smile on her face. 100 feet down was a middle-aged Black man pushing the wheelchair of a much older white woman. She was hunched over, looking towards the ground. I said hi. She looked up and asked, "What's your dog's name?" I said, "Ruff." The caretaker started talking to me. "His name is Chris. Each morning we were out here. It's beautiful, isn't it?" "Sure is," the woman said. "What's your dog's name?" she asked again. I said, "Ruff." The caretaker eyed me with the suggestion the woman didn't remember much. It didn't matter. "What's your dog's name?" she asked again. I repeated. She chatted more and I wished them a lovely day. She said, "Bye-bye, Ruff." Chris thanked me for talking and visiting Davenport. On the way back to the car, I passed by a very old bookstore, The Source, one of the few places open. Turns out the bookshop is 81 years old, one of those bookstores with nooks and aisles as far as the eye can see. I found 2 books by Thomas Mann that I had just learned about while listening to his Nobel Prize book on the drive, The Buddenbrooks. She said her name was Cindy and thanked me. When I was home, I was looking for another used book, so I called her. While she didn't have exactly what I wanted, she told me to keep trying and she'll keep an eye out and call me. I also learned from that phone call that the guy and the older woman I had seen earlier rent a small space above the bookshop where they live together so he can take care of her.
Thank you, Mark. That's a beautiful, beautiful story.
Who would go to Davenport?
You know, I think that's one I haven't been to. I've been to Cedar Rapids.
Right.
And I will say that, and it was during a name trail, this back in the 80s, I think I was covering. But I don't think any of us knew what to expect from Iowa, but they were the nicest, kindest people I ever met. And it was during the summer, and these little churches would have these amazing summer Sunday meals for us. It was beautiful.
And remember, on the way out, I went to Iowa City to the writers' workshops. On the way back, I didn't want to stop there again. And I looked at Rails to Trails, and there was the Mississippi Riverfront Water Trail. We have one more to read.
I'm sort of caught up here all of a sudden. Yes, I have one more to read. Traditions. Sue Miller. Tonight is Shabbat. I love the lighting of the candles, blessing of the challah, the wine, and the Shehekianu.
Shehekianu.
Sheh,
Heck,
Hek,
E,
Iyanu.
prayer.
Prayer. Memories of Friday night dinners, family and friends around the table, a good meal and good conversation. All week, I look forward to Shabbat. Family traditions around food connect me back to childhood. Chestnut stuffings, memories of Thanksgiving. Potato pancakes, latkes for Hanukkah. Matzo ball soup, chopped liver, and haroses on Passover. Christmas, going out for Christmas for Chinese or Japanese food. Shehekayanu prayer
Mhm.
is said for good health, long life, and the first time you do something. Latkes are potato pancakes in Hebrew. Matzo ball soup is chicken soup with matzo dumpling. Haroses is a concoction of apples, cinnamon, walnuts chopped up with wine or juice added. It's symbolic of the mortar used to build the pyramids. It is eaten in a matzah cracker sandwich with horseradish.
Mhm.
What a combo. Oh,
It's
It's me.
the bitterness.
chopped liver pate is cooked chicken livers chopped with sauteed onions and garlic, served with crackers or with veggies.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. It just brings back, and Peg, I don't know if you know this, most Jews on Christmas Day go out for Chinese food.
I did not know
Yeah,
that.
maybe it's New York. Oh, let's go for Chinese because everything else is closed.
Right. Oh, how funny.
So that's the Jewish tradition. That's just passed on, like putting $500 in free parking in Monopoly. Nobody knows where it started. Yeah, I have some more snippets. I'll finish them next week. Thank you, everybody, for being around, being an awesome community, and coming back this week. And we look forward to more, which leads us to the prompt. And Peggy and I were chatting. You want to say something?
Well, I was just going to ask you and this is going to be very, very hard, but again, can you say one word or two words that summarize your journey?
Home,
It's okay. Home.
home,
Mm-hmm.
grateful
Home and
for
grateful.
what's home and what I continue to learn about me and what's out there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And the barking dog. It's the shadows. What's with you today? I told you got more confident. So the prompt number 76. Oh, 76. That's appropriate for election day. Yeah. The prompt for next week is we always read Hallmark cards and everything. What are you grateful for? What are you thankful for? The prompt for next week is who are you thankful for?
Who are you thankful for?
The
Because
month-
we are in the month of
month of
thankfulness.
Who are you thankful for?
I like that.
Prompt 76 next week. And thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank you. It's fun to be back with KGUAWriters. We had a really fun educational week last week, but it's also time to get back to community. We are community radio. And I want you to know the temperature dropped 3 degrees. When we signed on, it was 61. It's now 58. It looks like it's raining pretty steadily. If you look at the weather map, all you see is green. And I think it's going to rain today, tonight. Tomorrow might be cloudy
I
and
think
not
it's
so
going to
much
rain
rain.
today. Who did that song? And I think it's going to rain today.
We will have song titles. It's going to be one of our prompts. What song title do you always remember? Okay, this is KGUAWriters. Great to have you back, Mark and Ruff. And it's time for us to go to Native America calling live from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Okay, what did I do with them? I just had them up here. What did I do? Here they are, right here. And let's go there right now.
Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Nearly 11 million viewers of the Astros Braves World Series games got to witness Braves fans doing the tomahawk chop, a cheer that Native activists and leaders say is racist and dehumanizing to Native Americans. The tomahawk chop and the Braves' native mascot are among those that pro sports teams continue to cling to, despite the trend away from objectionable imagery. We'll hear more about it right after National Native News.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. On Friday, a federal judge declined to issue a new order to halt Wisconsin's wolf hunt, but it's still not clear whether the hunt will proceed this fall. Rob Mincer has more.
The state's wolf hunt, scheduled to begin next Saturday, was already on pause due to an injunction from a Dane County judge that has prevented the state from issuing permits. But in a separate case, 6 Ojibwe tribes asked a federal judge to block the hunt on the grounds that allowing it to proceed would do irreparable harm to the state's wolf population. And that judge decided not to make a ruling unless the state case is overturned on appeal. So far, state officials have declined to say whether they will appeal. In February, Wisconsin hunters killed 218 wolves in just 3 days, well in excess of the state's quota of 119. Gussie Lord is an attorney for Earth Justice. She says the, quote, botched February hunt has made it impossible to know how many wolves are left in Wisconsin.
There's just so many unknowns here that it's certainly our position that it's not time for another hunt in the same year, the first year the species is taken off the endangered species list.
Hunting advocates say a growing wolf population threatens livestock and pets. For National Native News, I'm Rob Menser.
Tribes are opposing an advanced nuclear reactor proposal at the Hanford site in Washington. Eric Tigadoff reports.
The Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation have sent a letter to the U.S. Department of Energy saying they don't support the company X Energy's small modular reactor proposal. Mason Murphy is Energy and Environmental Science Program Manager for the tribes. He says the Hanford Nuclear Reservation near the Columbia River is partially within tribally ceded territory under the Treaty of 1855.
Because of that, we anticipate that the small modular nuclear reactors may have impacts on all of the following resources, specifically state and federally listed plants and wildlife, big game habitat, historic properties of religious and cultural significance as defined in the National Historic Preservation Act.
X Energy's proposal involves advanced nuclear reactor technology that could produce more than 300 megawatts of power. The Department of Energy awarded the company $80 million in initial funding in 2020. The company says the technology is based on safe, clean, and affordable technology. The Hanford nuclear site was chosen during World War II to produce much of the country's plutonium for 40 years. That also meant a lot of waste, which is a concern for the tribes. Murphy says there's no solution for long-term storage of nuclear waste, some of which has half-lives of 15 million years. He worries what will happen if nuclear projects continue to be built there.
To me, that would indicate that they are likely to continue developing that nuclear mission, and those resources may never become available if that were the case.
Murphy says the Department of Energy has committed itself to pursuing environmental justice and should consider what that means in this situation.
Some of these larger cleanup sites like the Hanford site represent some of the largest environmental injustice sites. And I think that we need to really ensure that that's being taken into consideration when starting to cite some of these technologies.
In 2007, the tribe's Board of Trustees adopted a policy that there should be no new nuclear energy production at the Hanford site without government-to-government consultation. Murphy says the Department of Energy has agreed to meet, but has yet to set a date. I'm Eric Tegedoff.
Google is kicking off Native American Heritage Month with an interactive doodle. The Google Doodle honors the late Zuni Pueblo weaver, potter, and fiber artist, Wiwa. The late Wiwa was a revered cultural leader devoting their life to cultural preservation. Monday's Google Doodle celebrates the art of weaving. I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Kawanak Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support by the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian, presenting the annual Native Cinema Showcase. 47 films representing 39 Native nations in 13 countries, available from November 12th to the 18th on demand at americanindian.si.edu. This reminder to get your COVID-19 vaccination is provided by the Association of American Indian Physicians and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, who support this show. Info at aaip.org or cdc.gov/coronavirus.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. In American history, perhaps no other established trade route had more influence than the Santa Fe Trail. The nearly 900-mile link between Missouri and New Mexico could be considered the country's first major interstate highway, bringing loads of settlers to the Southwest and beyond. If your only introduction to the history of the Santa Fe Trail comes from old movies or from many of the modern historical markers along the route, you might think tribes' only connection to the trail were as relentless and violent aggressors to the lives and property of peaceful settlers looking for a better life out west. But the true history ranges from displacement of established civilizations to a period of prosperity for some tribes. This year marks the 200th anniversary of the start of the Santa Fe Trail. This hour, we'll get a better view of what it meant for the many tribes in its path and its continuing legacy. And as always, we want to hear from you. Give us a call. The number is 1-800-996-2848. That's 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us today from Tempe, Arizona is Dr. James Writing. He is the lead researcher and author of American Indians and the Santa Fe Trail, retired professor and founding member of the American Indian Studies program at Arizona State University. He's Pawnee. Welcome back to NAC, James.
Thank you. It's good to be back on air with you.
James, I'd like to begin by asking you, what inspired you to start your research on the Santa Fe Trail?
I began my research on the Santa Fe Trail as I was doing my thesis and dissertation research back in the 1980s. And I wrote about the impact of the trail, some of the impacts on the trail on the Pawnee people and Pawnee Confederacy. Then probably around 2009, 2010, I was contacted by the long distance trail program of the National Park Service to do an in-depth study on Indian relationships with the Santa Fe Trail. And that project consisted of three separate components. One was an annotated bibliography, which I did about, I looked at about 1,500 sources and wrote blurbs on each of those as a part of that. And then the second part was a calendar of contact that listed all documented contact that I could come across between various Indian peoples and the Santa Fe Trail. And that was very extensive. And that calendar of contact shows, as your introduction mentioned, that that contact varied. It wasn't all warfare like that like historians often presented it to be. It's a very complex and nuanced history. And then the third part was to write the impact of the trail on several different Indian nations. And I did it on my own people, the Pawnee, the Comanches of the Central Plains, and then two Indian nations that had been removed from east of the Mississippi River to the west of the Mississippi River after the trail had already begun to function. And those were the Shawnee and Delaware.
Now, approximately when did the Santa Fe Trail begin?
It began in 1821 when an individual by the name of Becknell traveled from Missouri to New Mexico in hopes of gaining trade relations with New Mexico. At that time, it was a Spanish colony, and then the Mexican Revolt occurred, and Spain had tried to keep the U.S. out, and for good reason. You know, the United States, wherever it went, the citizens would move in, and before you know it, they were trying to take the land, which they often did. So you can understand why Spain tried to keep out the white Americans. But then Mexico had a policy of opening up trade. So that all happened in 1821, about the time Becknell entered New Mexico. And it continued as an important, mostly a commercial trade route. And then, as you mentioned in your introduction, a route for bringing settlers into New Mexico. it began in earnest in 1822 and continued until the Santa Fe, the Atchison-Topeka and Santa Fe Railroad came through New Mexico, which made travel substantially easier for those who wanted to go back and forth between New Mexico and Missouri. By which time, New Mexico had become a territory of the United States.
Now, there has not been a lot of research on the Santa Fe Trail from a Native American perspective. Why is that, James?
For one reason, we have very few scholars, and there are so many issues to deal with. I think it's existed beyond the scope of a lot of Native scholars. And my research, as I mentioned, has dealt with the Pawnee Confederacy and the Pawnee people by and large. So, the trail became a very important part of that relationship between the Pawnees and the U.S. government and white American citizens. And there was, peaceful trade at times, but there was also some aspects of a very dark history. For example, in the early 1830s, a group of Pawnees had visited a caravan that was traveling along the trail. And when those Pawnees got back to the Pawnee homeland in central Nebraska along the Platte River, a smallpox epidemic broke out. And the Pawnees attributed that smallpox epidemic to gifts given to those individuals that were tainted with the smallpox virus. And that epidemic had a tremendous impact on the Pawnee people. It killed about half of the population and created a lot of hardships, like pandemics do.
So beyond just being a trade route with goods being exchanged, it was also an avenue for sickness and pandemic, apparently. Now, the trail ran through what is now the state of Missouri into what is now New Mexico. But initially, there were multiple trade routes that connected those territories. Can you talk about those different routes?
Yeah, indigenous peoples had lived in that area since the beginning of time, according to our traditions. And there was a great deal of contact between the various Indian nations, trade networks that existed throughout the Americas. So it is very likely that there was already a route there that the indigenous peoples had. Right before the trail started, a group of Pawnees actually led an individual by the name of, I forget his name, but he became one of the first territorial governors of New Mexico and the U.S. And they led him across the southern plains into New Mexico. So that's just an example showing the knowledge that indigenous peoples had of the land and the way to get from one destination to another.
Folks, we're talking today with Dr. James writing in. We're learning about the Santa Fe Trail, and we really would love to get your comments. Give us a call, 1-800-996-2848. We'll get you on the air. James, you mentioned earlier that New Mexico was at one time and during the early years of the Santa Fe Trail, it was under rule of the Spanish Crown. And at one point, the Spanish Crown made it illegal for trade among Native Americans. How did that impact the trail?
The Spain's influence or presence was pretty much gone by the time that the trail started. And then it became a Mexican territory. So Mexico was open to trade with the United States. So Spain was pretty much out of the picture by then. But before then, Spain was like a typical European colonizer trying to control indigenous peoples, lands, resources, and it managed to conquer the pueblos of New Mexico and keep them under political and cultural subjugation a number of years, but it didn't have the power to extend its reach into the plains. In 1721, Spain sent a delegation into Pawnee country to try to control the Pawnees, because Pawnees sometimes raided New Mexico and also engaged in trade relations with New Mexico. So the Pawnees' response to that Villa Sur expedition was to fight and to defeat that party and to send it back to New Mexico. So my interpretation of that is that the Pawnees, through contacts with Pueblos and others, knew about the negative aspects of Spanish colonization, the attempts to force religious conversion, to take lands, and to subject indigenous peoples to coercive policies and involuntary labor.
Folks, if you have a comment for today's show, call in 1-800-996-2848. We're talking about the Santa Fe Trail with Dr. James writing in. You can also email at comments@nativeamericacalling.com. We'll be back right after this break. The Atlanta Braves' appearance in the World Series puts the team's objectionable imagery on a broader stage. The team has a partnership with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, but criticism continues over the use of the team name and the tomahawk chop. We'll check in on troublesome mascots on the next Native America Calling.
Too many do not have access to affordable high-speed internet. That's why AARP fought for the Emergency Broadband Benefit, a federal program to help lower the cost of high-speed internet for eligible households. Those who may have experienced financial setbacks during the pandemic or are struggling to get by may be eligible for a discount of up to $50 per month for high-speed internet or up to $75 per month for households on tribal lands. Info at aarp.org/EBB. AARP supports this show.
Everybody moving around that place like bees in a hive, like someone famous died. They finally found our common ground. Eyes of rain is coming down. All your paintings black and mouse, they didn't make a sound, but we got found out. And I'm heading out of Santa Fe. I look back and I look away, way like that blue sky fades. Feels like I'm running away. Babe, I know you know.
You're listening to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. The start of the Santa Fe Trail turns 200 this year. For about 80 years, it was the main route west for countless settlers. Today, we're getting the native view of the Santa Fe Trail that cut across lands occupied by Kiowa, Cheyenne, Pawnee, Arapaho, and other tribes. What do you know about the Santa Fe Trail? Give us a call. The number is 1-800-996-2848. That's 1-800-99-NATIVE. And we're talking with Dr. James writing in. And James, we've spoken earlier about the trade and connecting tribes with European settlers. And I remember as a young child growing up in New Mexico and speaking with my grandmother, and she would explain to me, especially I remember going up to Taos Pueblo one time and noticing that the Taos people had very different styles than our Southern Pueblo people. And they wore their hair differently and they dressed differently. And she explained to me then that Taos at one point was a major trading hub for Pueblo people and native peoples in that area. And you had a lot of Southern Plains tribes that would come and trade with the Taos. And because of that, some of those cultural styles and appearances, the Taos people adapted. So I'm curious, what are different cultural exchanges that occurred amongst different Native American tribes because of the Santa Fe Trail?
Those relations existed, as you mentioned, before the Santa Fe Trail. Various plain groups had trading relations with the Pueblos. Pecos Pueblo, which the trail went right by, but at a time when the Pecos was in decline. There was a great deal of trade that existed between the Plains Indians and the Pueblos, and at Taos too. Yeah, Taos was a major trade center that brought a lot of people into the area, and even Taos and other Pueblos would go onto the plains and hunt buffalo periodically. After the Pueblo Revolt, a number of Taos moved onto the plains for a number of years, and I think that probably helps explain the difference in the dress and the way that the Taos people wore their hair and braids, like a lot of the plains people did in those years. So it was a trade that continued even after the Santa Fe Trail, and it was just a part of that history of indigenous peoples come together in both conflict and in peaceful relations.
What were some of the goods that were traded on the Santa Fe Trail?
These were goods that were brought from the United States, and these goods could be, anything like cloth, manufactured goods, just a whole assortment types of trade goods, and it was a very lucrative business for white America. A lot of money was made, so that's why the trail prospered, and it became such a huge factor in bringing non-Indians through Indian land. Was the prospect of making money. A lot of money was indeed made off of the trail. But then it was also a route to bring settlers into New Mexico as well. And as I mentioned earlier about Spain wanting not to let white Americans into their territory, especially for trading purposes, and Mexico changed that policy to the detriment of its land holdings. So, the Mexican War broke out, and the United States used that as a justification for forcing Mexico to cede half of its territory, which I should mention was still Indian land. India never ceded its land. It was acquired. Claim was established through what's called a doctrine of discovery, this notion that the Europeans were culturally superior and had the superior religion of Christianity. And just the European passing through land or coming to the tip of it or whatever and claiming that land on the behalf of its crown. And so it's a part of this history of Western European expansion, competition between competing foreign nations, and oftentimes indigenous peoples being caught up in those relationships and that history.
Now, you mentioned the Spanish-American War and its influence with the trail. The Civil War also occurred around that same time frame. Was the Santa Fe Trail a factor in the Civil War?
It had to do with expansion, U.S. expansion. Slavery was a big issue, and the country was divided over whether new territory should be free or slave. And So that came into play. That dialogue, compromises were tried to work out to keep the union together, to try to limit the number or keep balance probably between the number of free and slave states. I think that the major impact of the Civil War was that it opened up more travel along the Santa Fe Trail into New Mexico, because resources that the country had that could have been used to support expansion were used to support that bloody Civil War, which resulted in the deaths of about 600,000 Americans. So
James,
that's, yes.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was finished with that thought.
James, your research begins with a really compelling narrative about you driving along the current route of where the Santa Fe Trail was. Can you describe that experience and what information was available when you began your research?
I took that trip because